My name is Paul Meehan, and I'm the chair of the MIT Enterprise Forum Northwest. And welcome to our 21st Century Art program. This is a first for us as long as I've been involved with MIT. And we've been expanding our horizons, looking at new different areas that tech has had an impact. And I think you'll agree, looking at those exhibits, it's had a huge impact. The MIT Enterprise Forum is an organization of dedicated professionals with 28 chapters located around the globe, affiliated with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology through the MIT Technology Review. We inform, connect, and coach technology entrepreneurs, enabling them to rapidly transform ideas into world-changing companies. You are cordially invited to our March program looking at the intersection of diversity in AR, VR, XR tech. We will have interactive displays of AR, VR that you can play with. And in addition, we're going to look at the workforce that makes AR, VR happen. We're a volunteer organization of people who seek to be inspired and educated through technology leadership. This program would not have been possible without the dedication of the following volunteers: Željko Želek, John Locke, Alexander Theoharis, Toussaint Myrix, Mark Anderson, Ben Keller, Melissa McQueen, Emilia Polaveva, and Vicki Owens. Vicki, would you stand up? And I wish we had a spotlight to put on you.
I'm here.
There you are. Okay, wave to everybody. Because of Vicki, we're all here tonight.
Excuse me. Vicki has earned a much bigger round of applause than that. Come on.
So, as it turns out, Vicki had this friend I'd never heard of, someone named Jenny Raffner, was it? And lo and behold, we depend on people with awesome connections, and we could not have done any better. So also thank you to Jenny. Our programs are made possible by, one last pitch. We're always looking for volunteers. If you volunteered for this event, take a look at the cool people you've gotten to meet and talk to. And we have lots of other great events coming up, so if you have some free time and you want to do something, I don't know, educational, stimulating, fun, volunteer. Our programs are made possible by Freelock Computing, the MIT Club of Puget Sound, the Harvard Club of Seattle, and Town Hall Seattle. And thank you to Candace if you're still wandering around for helping get everything organized for tonight. Our moderator tonight is Bob Rosen. Bob is a best-selling author, award-winning journalist, and national TV contributor for The Today Show, CBS This Morning, and CNBC. In addition to local work with King, Q13, and Como, he has been a consultant and board member of a variety of nonprofit organizations, including ACT Theater, the Rotary Club of Seattle, and Reither. So thank you very much, Bob, for lending your expertise. And the most important thing is that Bob is from New Jersey, and he helps us to keep this real.
It's scary, yes. A round of applause for Paul. They do great work. Okay, the materials for tonight's program talked a lot about how technology will change art. They did not talk nearly as much about something else important, which is how art needs to affect technology. Tonight's conversation will review both how art can impact technology and how technology needs to impact art. Two examples support this observation. The word technology, I'm going to get a little geeky, but this is MIT, so I'm supposed to. The word technology is a combination of two Greek words, techne and logos. Techne means art, craft, or skill, and logos means to speak of. You know who had all of this figured out way back in 1861? The Massachusetts Institute of Technology. MIT, in its original charter, this is going to blow your mind, the original charter of MIT stated, instituting and maintaining a society of arts, a museum of arts, and a school of industrial science. Any distinction between art and technology is an artificial construct. We are all better served when the membrane between the two is permeable, allowing ideas to flow back and forth. Before I introduce the panel, a quick poll. I want to do a poll of the audience. I just said to you that these two things are indistinguishable, but I'm going to contradict myself. Most of you lean in one direction or the other. And for the sake of the panel, I'd be really curious. I'm going to ask you first to raise your hand if you lean in the direction of art, and secondly, raise your hand if you lean in the direction of technology. We're kind of curious about where all of you fall. And you can't split the difference. You only get one answer. Raise your hand if you lean in the direction of art. Raise your hand if you lean in the direction of technology. Panel, same question. Art, technology. There we go, okay. Ginny voted twice, but she gets to do whatever she wants. Okay, I'm going to introduce the panel, and then Ginny's going to do a short presentation, and Mike and Alan are going to do their presentations in a few minutes. So you'll get to see a presentation by each of them. Mike Tyka has a PhD in biophysics, currently works on machine learning for Google in Seattle. He's been studying the structure and dynamics of protein molecules and writing computer simulation software to better understand the fascinating process of protein folding. Mike has been working with artificial neural networks as an artistic medium. You'll learn more about Mike in his presentation in a few minutes. Alan is an award-winning orchestral and choral composer whose compositions have been heard nationwide in a wide range of media, including interactive music, educational software packages, films, TV, advertising, and experimental works. Interactive music, non-linear adaptive music scores, multi-dimensional, positional, immersive music, and more. Alan will be performing for us soon. Ginny Ruffner, I love these two guys, but Ginny Ruffner is the rock star here tonight. President Kennedy wrote a book called Profiles in Courage. Ginny Ruffner has lived a life that is a profile in courage. A rising star in the art community. I told her she might blush, so I warned her about this. A rising star in the art community. She was severely injured in an auto accident, did 5 weeks in a coma, 5 years in a wheelchair. Did it stop her art? No. She adapted and has created an amazing body of work encompassing glass, augmented reality, painting. To be honest, it's easier to review the art she hasn't done than the art she has done. An amazing spirit, and now we're fortunate enough to get a short presentation by Ginny.
Wow. I'm impressed. Okay. So first I'm gonna give you a 2-minute introduction to you. I don't expect everybody at all to know what I do after done, so I'm going to give you a little primer. This is I make stuff. That's probably the best description of what I do. I make stuff. I make big stuff like this, 30 foot tall, Kinetic water feature downtown. I make little stuff like 2 foot tall glass sculpture, usually about the history of art. I make medium-sized stuff, bronze and steel and glass. These are about as tall as me. I make pop-up books. I forgot to tell you, this is about wonder. This is also, darn. How do I go backwards? Messing up my timing. Okay, forget all that. We're back to go. These are the pieces that are about as tall as me, and they're usually about genetics. I also make pop-up books, usually about inspiration, and room-sized installations, usually about wonder. This one had 60,000 freeze-dried roses. And this is another one with glass and steel and paintings. But in 2014, I was invited down to Florida to see this startup company, new technology, and they wanted me to advise them on what an artist might be able to do with their technology. It was a totally new way for me to work, and it was actually the beginnings of augmented reality. I was so impressed. I came back and I thought, well, I've got to figure out how to do that. So, and as you can probably tell, I'm not a digital native. I hate to admit it, but when I was in graduate school, computers hadn't even been invented yet. So I had a major uphill learning curve. So that's who I am. Nice to meet you. Okay, that's my introduction part. This is my presentation part. Now, I bet you can tell I kind of talk funny. So I'm going to show you these two brief videos about augmented reality that I did. I interviewed genetic research scientists across the country for a couple years to come up with this list of intangible and ephemeral concepts that the viewers can hybridize with their drawings. Let me show you what I mean with these two words, giggling and emergent. After the participants draw what they imagine a hybrid of those two words looks like, it's taken over to the modelers who translate 2D into 3D. And here's the model of emergent giggling. It's beautiful. In the third phase, the 3D model is deployed to the iPads, where on the screen the participants can paint the 3D model with their finger, thereby enabling creativity in yet another level, hopefully making genetic processes and 3D modeling more approachable. I'm really having a great time. What about you?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Nice to see everyone interested.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And you need to sign it and put the two words on the page so that we don't forget what they were. And your last name too. So that we can
This exhibition is called The Reforestation of the Imagination. It's a multimedia exhibit mainly comprised of glass sculpture and augmented reality. Back in 2014, I was invited to a technology company to see their new product they're working on. It was augmented reality. It was just so phenomenal. I came home and changed my whole art practice. My practice was not digital at all. So first I had to learn how to do CGI. So I audited a class at Cornish where I met my digital collaborator, Grant Kirkpatrick. And then I was offered a artist in residency at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma. So I used that fabulous opportunity to make all the tree stumps and branches. I was told that you cannot deploy AR off glass, which only made it more imperative for me to do it. With AR, it's a lot of barcode technology. It's all pattern recognition. So you have to make a pattern that the camera can recognize. So that's what the tree rings are. The pattern that tells the camera, you see this, you make that. Drawing has been a critical part of my art practice since day one. And I've been drawing for quite a while now. Plants that are in my mind the result of an alternative evolution. And they might have been genetic combinations of various attributes or colors or functions. The objects that are deployed from the AR are iterations of those drawings. Another component of the exhibition is the taxonomy of the plants, which I named each plant. I researched the Latin word for what each plant represents, or the parts of each plant, and gave them all a Latin name. And then there's a description. The idea behind reforestation of the imagination is one of hope, and it reflects my adamant belief that there's always something good about to happen. It offers a potential of regrowth within a devastated landscape. And just as I do believe the nature will reinvent itself, as does imagination. It's always there, it's always there. It's always reimagining itself. I hope you enjoyed it.
Help with the mic stand. So we're a bunch of technology-enabled people, but I guess I want to go in the opposite direction to begin. Was there ever a point at which you resisted technology? And anybody have a story about resisting technology and then kind of being converted by it? Mike's right there.
Actually, no. I love technology. Yes.
So from the very beginning, you were sold.
Total geek. Yep.
Same here, geek.
Yeah, I started. I also started with. I started on the technology side.
We need to use the mics. We're going to get the technology thing down eventually.
Yeah, so I started also very far on the technology side and have been approaching the art side.
Same thing, Jenny. You were always engaged in technology.
Yes, and actually, I would be a lot richer if I wasn't such a early adopter of technology. I have the most ridiculous, like the very first video digital camera. It was huge, now they're in every phone. But when it came out, I thought, wow, this is cool. So I got lots of stuff like that.
So welcome to the Geek Squad panel, everyone. Is there a place in your art where technology's played a bigger role, or something that comes to mind where technology really changed your direction?
Yeah, I mean, when I first learned about neural networks, I had this sort of a similar aha moment. I was like, wow, this has a lot of potential, and started figuring out how you could use it for art purposes.
So what most people see as technology and science, you suddenly saw art there. Can you talk about that moment when you realized it was art?
I mean, I saw what the algorithms could sort of come up with when they were trained with a whole bunch of images, even though they were not, like the Deep Dream algorithm is not designed to create imagery, but a coworker of mine found a way to run it backwards. And when I saw his images, I was like, wow, this has a lot of potential for something it wasn't really made for.
Alan, in terms of technology,
My primary focus on that was to play loud. Because the other people had amps and that sort of thing too, so I had to keep up with them. So I would have synthesizers and my amps and distortion and effects units and everything like that, and that's how I got into it at first. And then computers came along, and then you could record it and make more sounds that you couldn't do before.
I've started to notice at concerts and things, there's more computers on stage, people are doing things. Give us a behind the scenes look. What's really going on with some of the computer power on the stage that we as audience members wouldn't know?
My first love would be the keyboard player. A lot of them have a pretty elaborate computer system instead of the synthesizers, and they run all their stuff through there. And of course, computers can be a little bit weird sometimes, especially in a live thing. So they always have a backup that they can switch back and forth on, so it's smooth and you don't notice the error. That's one place. The sound systems have. I'm trying not to talk for hours here. They have first thing that comes to mind is feedback eliminators. They listen to the room. They can hear a frequency that's going to be it is looping around, and it'll grab it and EQ it out. Automation, the light shows are, of course, your presets with computer control. They often have things that are measuring the temperature of the amplifiers, how loud they are, and compensating. Are speakers dead? Are they okay? Are they starting to burn out? Are things overheating? Goes on and on.
Okay.
All kinds of things.
Ginny, I'm interested in terms of disability, and you seem absurdly not restricted by disabilities. What have you learned about using technology to allow you to do things that most people wouldn't think were possible?
Well, I am extremely stubborn, and it as a stubbornness enabler, I think many aspects of technology can be used in that way. But I think that what really becomes the challenge is to take tech and say, you're my slave now, and make tech be in service to the art, not the other way around. That being able to use it to, not just because, and this is a huge danger for me especially, not just because, oh wow, this is really cool, just to take it on beyond that, to make it into something that changes your life, that it gives you something new to think about.
I think I've written books and columns, and sometimes I've had to take out my funniest line because it just didn't fit the flow. And when you were talking about being seduced into technology and then having to remember where you were going, do either of you ever have that struggle that because you can do something, you're getting pulled down and then you realize maybe that's not the best direction? Can either of you relate to what Ginny just said?
Sometimes when I need to write some music, I'll have a keyboard sitting there, and I'll say, well, what can I do here? And I start playing with it. Say, oh wow, that's cool, and I forget what I was supposed to do, and I just keep going, oh wow, look at this. Wow, this sounds cool, and I'm playing around in it, and 3 hours have gone by, and I go, oh my gosh. Yeah.
Very much. Like a lot of the generative algorithms have a tremendous number of parameters you can play with, and you could spend hours and hours just tweaking and tweaking, changing things. And it's always sort of interesting, keeps you engaged, but at some point you kind of need to make a decision about a choice about what is the thing going to be. And especially interacting with technology like that, it becomes kind of a curatorial role for me, where I see, like with those faces, I generated thousands, and I had to sort of pick which ones spoke to me.
Anything to add, Jenny?
Yeah, I think I love the word curating. I think that's exactly right. You have all these wonderful results. Technology is, several types of tech are extremely seductive, and it requires a lot of will to say, no, just because you're beautiful doesn't mean you're art, get out of here.
Do you actually shoo it out of your house, huh?
If I don't, it takes it over, gets in the way, talks too much. I can't think.
Michael, you want to do your presentation now?
Yes, but
Okay.
I also have to run to the bathroom, something technology cannot solve. So excuse me for a moment.
Okay.
Well done.
I've been on a panel and no one's ever done this to me before. That's great. I love that. Okay, I want to ask both of you a question about the audience. How has technology changed your audience? A friend of mine is head of programs down at University of Puget Sound, and he said in the old days people would buy tickets for concerts a couple weeks in advance so he knew what was going on. Now people are buying tickets the day before, and he said it's really challenging to have a sense of that. How is technology changing your audience?
They're younger.
Well, I remember the first things we did was we'd run around and hang posters up on telephone poles. So you don't have to leave the house anymore, so that's, but in terms of number, seems kind of the same, but there's less work. So I guess that helps. In terms of you don't have to physically get up and run all over the place and do stuff. It's the communication factor that helps.
So with your augmented reality stuff, Ginny, there's technology involved. How are audiences able to pick it up fairly quickly?
Yeah, again, it depends on their age. But if I can understand it, they can understand it. I just have to make it really not offensive and easy to understand how to use it. That is just one of the parts of using tech artists, being able to communicate so that other people can use it as well.
So you talked earlier about being seduced into technology. Do you ever look at things from the perspective of your audience, or are you doing things just for yourself? The age-old art question, Ginny.
I'd be lying if I didn't say do it for me first. But I do. I think if you make art for an audience, you often make Drake. You have to make something that you are satisfied with and really appeals to you and you feel proud of. And if somebody else enjoys it, then that's kind of icing on the cake.
Take it away, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks for humoring me. I'm sure you can all relate to that situation. We're all humans. Okay. So as we already talked about, I came very much from the technology perspective, and rather than choosing which side of the thing I'm on, I like to think more of which direction I'm moving, and I've been moving from technology towards art. And at first it was kind of I didn't know anything about it, and then the journey for me is basically learning more about how to be an artist and how to express myself. So the first opportunity I had to do a piece of art was with a group of people who went to Burning Man. That was a very low entry bar in a sense because there's no curation and gallery and all that. So it was just fun, just build a thing, and they were building something really cool and amazing, and I had a really good time. And so that's the first time I thought, oh, well, maybe I should do that as a hobby. And because I'm a biochemist, what was in my head and I'd been looking at for 10 years were protein molecules, and so I started learning, which is also technology enabled. On YouTube, you can learn all this stuff now. It wasn't the case when I was a kid. So like, how do you work with copper? How do you, and so I made these things, these sort of bendy protein shapes. They started small, and then they became bigger. This is about as tall as I am. And then I, sort of by chance, took a class, actually my teacher is sitting right over there, in glass blowing, and totally fell in love with glass. And so from then on, I mostly started doing things in glass, and eventually got into glass casting. Started immediately mixing with technology as well, so I started using 3D printers to make shapes that are based on scientific coordinates, so they can be very precise and they fit together, which is kind of fun. You can build very exact shapes like this. So that piece is in the back. And then, as I mentioned already, I, through work, got exposed to machine learning and especially what's sort of been hot in the last 5 or 6 years is artificial neural networks, and started using those for art. And yeah, just these networks were trained to recognize things, and yet you can tweak them in a way to make them generate images, which is not intuitive at all. And of course, what comes out is very strange. And these are sort of made with the Deep Dream algorithm. Here's another piece mixed with a photo of a friend of mine with Deep Dream. But then as time went on, I started thinking more about, okay, the subject matter. What is technology doing to our lives? And so in the last couple of years, I really switched over to combining the techniques that I've learned and also talk about technology as a subject matter. So this is about the way companies exploit us, in a sense, and harvest us through our phones. This is a piece that was in Seoul last year about how we get sort of overrun by fake opinions from Twitter and other social media. It's also very prevalent, and I'll just say a few more things about that in a minute. This one doesn't need a lot of explanation. I struggle with my phone all the time. It changes my behavior, it changes my choices, and so that's what inspired that piece. Yeah, and then the fake identities is a little bit back to where I was just saying our world is changing a lot, especially with the advent of machine technology. And so I'm just going to play this video. This is a bunch of these faces. Let's see, does it play? There we go. So what are the consequences of algorithmically falsifiable voice and video for a democratic society? Last year, the Justice Department charged 13 individuals with interfering in American electoral and political processes who worked for a well-funded troll factory called the Internet Research Agency, which had 400 employees. Millions of tweets purporting to come from real people in America were created, spreading and amplifying both left and right-wing conspiracy theories and opinions with the aim of sowing divisions. Other accounts focused on just plain fear-mongering. This campaign was largely driven manually by people, but by 2020, the technology will likely be good enough to automate it, to generate this content automatically. The generation of realistic-looking avatars is already here. Instagram influencer Michaela Sousa has over 1 million followers on Instagram, which is an avatar puppeteered by an LA-based startup. Today, you can buy 5,000 YouTube views for as low as $15. You can also buy likes, comments, engagement. In December, the New York Times reported that for a period of time, a full half of YouTube traffic was bots masquerading as people. Facebook reports that up to 40% of its video engagement is bot-driven, though a recent suit filed by small advertisers claims the figure is closer to 80%. Deepfakes, porn with faked faces, often using celebrities as targets, has proliferated on Reddit and porn sites. The technology used is exactly the same that was used to make these imaginary people. But it's used to realistically transfer the face of one person onto the video of another. Last spring, a fake video circulated showing the Parkland school shooting survivor Emma Gonzalez ripping up the Constitution. Conservative activists had shared the video as supposed proof of her un-American treachery. In September, Google added what it termed involuntary synthetic pornography to its ban list. The age of synthetic truth is here, a world where we cannot tell true from fake anymore. As a reaction, we grow to be suspicious of everything, including the truth, and it's called the liar's dividend. At a rally last year in July, accusing the mainstream media, the President of the United States exclaimed, "Just remember, what you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening."
Michael, that can only be described as a major downer. But now that you've reared this ugly soul and you work for Google, please give us some sense that somebody's doing something about this.
I can't talk about details, but yes, people in the industry are very aware of this and very concerned and are trying to countermeasure some of this stuff. But it's an arms race. Like, if you make technology to detect fakes, that same technology can be used to create better fakes. The algorithm used to make those images is actually two neural networks having a fight. The first neural network is trying to fool the other neural network. So the first neural network is a generator. It tries to make more and more realistic faces in order to convince the discriminator network that its output is real. It's trying to confuse it. And in turn, the discriminator network learns how to distinguish better, which in turn drives the generator to become more proficient at making better faces. So those are two flip sides of the same coin.
Say something to make us sleep tonight.
I don't know. It's exciting times. I think, you know. Those are challenges, and I think
You sound like an employee of Google with that response.
no. I mean, but I think these things are interesting, and that's why they're worth talking about, and that's why they're worth making art about and having this conversation. They're going to affect us and our children, and we better get on top of this. This is kind of unprecedented. We haven't had this situation before, so.
Do you two have any thoughts on what you just heard?
I'm going home and getting under my bed.
Sorry.
Wow, trying to get my breath back here after that. Okay, so switching gears for a second, in terms of your art, this is a best and worst question. What's the best part of technology? What's the worst part of technology in terms of your art?
The answer to both is money. It takes a lot of money to make things. And it's really, the good thing is, to disseminate it is pretty inexpensive. So money is both good and bad, I think.
Well, it certainly gives you more options. That's the positive side. Of course, that there's a positive and a negative thing that goes with that. You have to keep learning, which is cool, but that takes time. And then we use it.
Money, time. Michael, you want to dive in here?
The best and worst things about technology?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think technology is incredibly enabling, but by itself, it can be used for good things and it can be used for bad things, just like any technology, and it's sort of easy to forget. And I think previous generations have also struggled with. If you think about nuclear technology, we've been dealing almost a century now with the same issue, right? Like powerful technology for good, but also some very dark sides, and we're sort of in the middle of a new one.
Alan, you want to start toward your presentation? Please. Are there any, why don't you head over there and I'll talk for a minute while you're going. Are there any precedents in history? Remember in economics, they talk about the tulip thing in the 1800s, Are there any precedents in technology in history where people have got a handle on technology? Or are we in uncharted turf?
I'm not sure what you mean by getting a handle on it, but an example that comes to mind with respect to art is the advent of photography, which really had a tremendous effect on painting, because prior to then the only way to make a likeness of something was to paint it, and so people were trying to make more and more realistic images, at least in the Western world, but now photography kind of solved this, and I think what happened is people started thinking, well, what else can we paint, and how can we paint in ways that are non-realistic? And I think, that the emergence of that technology changed painting very dramatically after that point.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I think photography is a good example. When it first came out, people tried to take photos that replicated still lives. It took a good 50 years before they realized what photography could do. But another technology that totally upended the world, the printing press, that had huge repercussions that no technology today can come close to, I don't think.
Thank you. Take it away, Alan.
By the way, this is Spencer Hoveskelin helping me out here. Please, thank you. What I'm going to try to do is, very quickly, to fit in with this, is I'm going to use music to convey information instead of just setting the mood. Setting the mood, of course, but more, try to get information in. And the way we're gonna play short little things, and the way I'm gonna do this is through a score I composed for a production several years ago, Frankenstein, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with the story. So this was a score that played through the entire 2-hour production non-stop. So we're just gonna play little fragments. We got different kinds of technology. We have the bass. He's going to tell you a little bit about this one.
Oh, yeah. What I like about this technology, this bass, I'm going to ramble for a moment if that's all right, because I'm a rambling man, is it's 300 years old, built in Italy, and made of several different kinds of wood: spruce on top, maple back and sides, ebony fingerboard, a maple bridge. Strings, although these are steel initially, they were guts, so you had to have a dead animal in order to play the thing. And then, of course, on the bow, you have a horse's tail tied to it, and people adapting to be able to use this equipment, trying to, rather than finding a sticky horse, finding the right tree to rub the horse on in order to get it to stick to the guts just right. It's a lot of good problem solving. But yeah, 300 years old technology here.
Excellent. I have here also the piano, old technology, and I have some synthesizers. Okay. Now for the score, I made it it's like a hierarchy. Okay. In the original Mary Shelley novel, the whole story is kind of a binary thing. There's the part about the creature and the part about Victor. So this version that production was made was written by an adaptation by a local author, and my task, as it were, how do I say this politely, was to kind of keep the binary thing in focus. So the focus on the creature, focus on Victor. Okay. One of the things was, the themes I decided I needed in here was death and life from death. So a long static note, just holding, so it's a long note with nothing in there, but then somehow adding animation to it. Okay, one way to do it, Spencer's going to show you, yes. a long note, and he's gonna change the timbre of the note as it's playing, so there's kind of animation even though the note is holding. And he does it by moving up and down the. Sure. Have a lot of that going on in the score. Now, the theme of the story also was they don't really describe how the creature was made. There's kind of a subtle implication of electricity. So the other sustaining note. Okay, I also remember I'm using a piano in this. I'll get back to that later. But one of the synthesizer sounds is a long sustaining note which is consisted of a piano, a note holding, and a bass, and they're melded together and it kind of cycles through them. It's kind of subtle, but you can hear kind of a sweeping back and forth between the two sounds. So I use that in there. As I was going, it seemed this was a little bit dark. I needed some contrast, and I wasn't sure what to do. Then it realized to me that something human. So I added in, just for contrast, kind of a vocal, sweeping between different vocal sounds. And you'll hear all this, and I have a piano layered with it too. We'll play this all together. Okay, now we have a little to construct the notes and the themes of that. Decided to build the music up like the creature was put together. So I have a tiny little cell of 3 notes. Or if I play the same thing up higher. So I take those 3, I shift them up so they have the same relationship, they're just higher, and I just put a long string of them together. So you get something kind of abstract like this. Kind of dead, not too exciting. Now, if we make it musical and put something to it, the creature theme would be. Okay. Now, where do I get the one for Victor? Well, in the story, the creature says to Victor, "You are my visible echo. You are my reflection." I go, ah, just turn it around. So, something like this. Okay. Now everything else is just based off that. There's a lot more details, but I don't need to go into that here. So, during one scene, the creature is growing and learning and trying to figure out, who am I, what am I doing here, why was I created, and this little bit that Spencer's going to play is underscore for that. Are you ready, sir? Go for it. what we were doing before in there. It kind of represents the creature's mind assembling and getting put together better and all that. For Victor, I took that little fragment, and there's another scene later on where Victor realizes that the creature he created is what he says a horror. And so I took that reversed theme and made a little piece for that. I'll play a short little bit so you hear that.
So Alan, do you have a big finale for us?
We do.
Let's hear it. Let's turn around our applause. Geez, between Michael's internet scare and that music, good luck sleeping tonight, gang. What I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the artists from the back of the room to come up, and we're going to have a big Q&A. We were initially going to do cards, but I think I'm going to run around with a microphone. So if you have a question for any of the artists, get ready. Can we make some room for some other people up here? Tamea, I knew I was going to have trouble pronouncing that, is a ceramicist and the founder of Slip Rabbit, a research and education studio focused on digital ceramics. She earned an MD in neurology and neuropsychology in 1993, a BFA and an MFA in ceramics. The great thing about her is she not only makes you feel less creative, she also makes you feel less intelligent. A native of California, Eric Salisbury, artist, teacher, designer, muralist. Eric has worked with children for over 30 years, teaching them how to express themselves by collaborating with others and making art. And Mohammed Ahmad is, I'm not going to go for the middle name, works as the intersection of calligraphy, data, art, and technology. He has training in Arabic and Chinese calligraphy and a doctorate in computer science. So a round of applause for everyone, please. Okay. Questions? Anyone have any questions? Hello? Questions? Questions? You have a question? Come over here. We want you to be on the mic.
Sure. I wanted to know from Eric what his inspiration is.
I'm inspired by just life and living. I mean, everything I look at, everything I embrace, it gives me inspiration. You know, I'm very visual, and I look around all the time. I see so many things that stimulate my creativity.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for being here. I've got a question about what you think whether or not AI can create art.
For anyone.
I mean, I think the question, I can't remember, I think it's a famous computer scientist said it's a little bit like asking the question whether submarines can swim. I think computers can definitely create things, and increasingly they can create things that are not obvious derivatives, even though we're very much at the beginning. But if it's art, I think that's in the question of the beholder. Do you care about the opinion of the computer? Presumably when you look at a picture made by a human, you kind of connect with that human, you imagine who that is, why did they make this art, not some other piece of art. I mean, a piece of rock can be an art if the artist says, places it right, and says, this rock is the one to look at. So I think it's a really difficult question to sort of bluntly answer. But I think until computers have strong opinions of their own, which I'm pretty sure they don't yet, it's very much still the artist or the operator's art with the AI, if they use an AI as a tool.
Anybody else want to dive in on that one?
Yes, I agree completely. Art is what an artist says I made. And so far, computers do not say, I made art. This is art, I made it. And I think, yeah, you're right. When they get opinionated, yep, then it'll be art.
Okay, David here, I'm giving him an opportunity to make a plug because it's about technology and art. So go ahead and make your plug, David.
Well, I actually have a question first, which relates to that. On that question about whether technology is liberating or dooming us, what does anybody have to say about the role of art in tipping the balance and making one more likely than the other?
Maybe I can speak to that a little bit in a way that some of you who I met out there, I'm printing with ceramic material, and I wouldn't be interested in 3D printing in other materials or plastic because it sort of behaves as we expect it to behave. But ceramics adds so much unknown to the printing process that I think that's where maybe the answer to your question is that there is a lot that we assume technology does or science does, and there is some sort of a certainty and exactness that we get from it. And so challenging technology with art, I think, will give us that sort of that uncertainty in there. That's always really interesting.
Great.
Your plug.
My plug. Oh, thanks. Bob insisted I give a plug. I'm with Infinity Box Theater Project. So there's another whole dimension of arts, and we basically bring science people of various kinds and theater people of various kinds together and do projects. And the one coming up soon in May is called Centrifuge, where we get a bunch of playwrights and directors and actors and science writers and throw them all together. We pick a theme on Monday night, and on Friday we have 5 10-minute science plays accompanied by a talk about the science by the science writers. And it's wild and fun and very interesting.
And the website again is?
infinitybox.org.
That's the end of your commercial. Anybody else? Question? Of course, she's on the other side of the room.
I was watching a program, and there was a particular artist, and at the end, he wanted to sum up the presentation, and he said, as an artist, he thought the most important thing was that it surprised him. If it's not going to surprise him, how is it going to surprise the audience? And he wants them to leave with that feeling of something different. I just wanted to know your opinion on that. Anybody?
There's a difference between being surprised and something different. I agree with something different. Being surprised, I think, is pretty subjective, and I don't think that it's a valid definition for art. being new and different. Yes.
I have to agree to some extent. Surprise is one of those things where you don't expect it and you like the unexpected, what is unexpected. And so I think that sometimes as an artist, we create and we're looking for what would communicate back to us. So we're actually communicating with the material, with the supplies, with the tools, with our imagination. So it's kind of bringing that which is mechanical in a sense, that which is organic. And then you're producing something, whether it's visible, because you made another object out of it, or something that is digital, which really does not technically exist, but does not exist in the real world. And so until it's made into a material thing that you can touch, does it really exist? It's like an imagination.
Anyone else? Okay, I have one other quick question. We all know technology is perfect and there's never breakdowns, and we didn't have the sound problems earlier. That was a joke. Anyone have a good technology horror story in terms of your art experience?
I have plenty of those.
Give us your best.
I think the worst experience when you working with digital. I'm working with digital art, and I'm creating art images or a series of images, and I'm using the technology. And the worst thing that could happen to you is to have your computer crash on you, and all the work you've done, no matter how many hours, it's gone. Now I don't know where this stuff goes to. One day somebody will discover it, but it makes you want to drop kick your computer and whatever else you want to do to get even. But there's nothing you can do. You have to start over.
Michael in Google knows where it goes. Anyone else?
I actually have, I guess, less of a horror story and more of a moral dilemma. So for the last couple of years, I've been working on this project. You can call it science or you can call it art. Where I've been trying, so my father passed away 5 years ago. So I've been trying to create a simulation of my father, which can interact with my kids. Because when he passed away, I didn't have any kids. So the moral dilemma or the question comes that, is it really ethical? Is it right to even create such a system which can actually interact with people after they have passed away? And also, we are creating, or in this case, I'm creating such a system without the consent of the person whose simulation is being created. But from my own selfish perspective, I suppose it's necessary because I never had that experience of interacting with my grandparents. And I did see my father interacting with my nieces and nephews, and although I can never compensate for that because I think technology is not sufficiently advanced, but at least I do want my children to have some aspect of that interaction. So that's the moral dilemma. The horror part comes where, as I'm creating the simulation, so there are these unexpected utterances that I get from this system, and which I ask myself, well, that's not something that my father would have said. Or alternatively, there are for the system to work, it has to work in a limited domain. So for example, and I've done this, if I ask the system, well, what do you think about Donald Trump's election? And well, its reaction is not something what my father would have said. It's because there's a lot of context which I have not built into that system.
Anyone else?
I think that's really interesting. I love that. But what strikes me is that we've actually done that sort of thing forever just by telling our children about our ancestors. And in the same way, they don't get to consent to our version of them from our personal subjective memory. And it's equally distorting in some sense, but it's very important, right? Because it gives that interaction with the model of them in our head. I love that. I love that project. It's great.
We have a question.
This is for Mike. When you first started realizing that you could use the digital technology that you live in to create something that you would call art, did you ever at any point say to yourself, I want to create, or I have created something not surprising, not interesting, but beautiful?
Yeah, I mean, that's really what pulled me in. So I looked at the images and I'm like, oh wow, I'm drawn to these images. They're beautiful and they're unexpected. They were surprising in that sense of the word.
Anyone else on that beauty question? You want to tackle it? Okay, here we go.
So kind of a mixed arts and technology question. Humans are able to make these big leaps. I mean, I go look at old art and it was all two-dimensional, and then someone had the idea of perspective, which always kind of struck me as we see with perspective. I mean, how did artists ever start out doing flat 2D drawings? But once one did perspective, within like 50 years, all artists were doing it. And similarly, first time I saw a map of the world, I kind of thought, geez, sure looks like South America and Africa fit together and all. And it took, scientists, humans, sometime in the 60s or 70s said, plate tectonics. And humans can make those leaps. Do you think computers can make those leaps?
I think in principle, yes. I certainly think of ourselves as essentially complicated computers. But there are some examples now of reinforcement learning algorithms that learn, for example, to play computer games just from looking at the screen. So they don't have any direct access to the game, just like a human would. And they discover strategies that humans didn't discover. For example, they're very effective. Or another example, the recent AlphaGo matches that DeepMind eventually won. Experts later looked at all the moves that the AI made and said that some of them were quote unquote beautiful. So the machine found things that were not discovered by thousands of years of people playing Go. And so yes, that makes me think that yes, they should be capable of doing that eventually.
Jenny, you look like you want to say something.
I agree. I think it depends on how you define learning and jumps. Yes, I do think computers can make huge jumps, but I don't know that they're jumps that we care about.
And then just to add to that, actually I do have a horror story. It's not myself, but so there's a deep learning system which was trained on some data, and it could identify a certain skin condition perfectly, like superhuman performance, almost 100% accuracy. And so the scientists and the clinicians who were working on this, well, they thought that, no, we now have created a system which can perfectly diagnose this disease. And then one of the researchers went back and looked at the data, and so it turned out that when the patient had in all the images, when the patient had a certain condition, they had always put a certain marker, a small ruler next to it. So the computer was not, or the algorithm was not learning or identifying the disease, but the presence of the ruler. So there can be these, and then within the medical domain, which I'm currently working on, this is not an isolated example. There have been other cases where computers have made these conceptual jumps and they're performing almost perfectly, and we think that, well, they're better than humans, and that may actually be the case, but if it's a domain in which, say, there's a high risk involved, assuming that there's no high risk involved in art, that the default position is to be skeptical, at least in certain cases, of how well your algorithm or the computer is doing.
Okay. This is going to be the last question. Then I'm going to ask each panelist to talk for about a minute or so to make a conclusion, to give advice to the audience, to tell a short but funny story. But I'm going to give each of you a final statement here. Where was that question?
Hi, so I come from the world of scientific research where we have a lot of sort of pipe dreams for technology. It's a lot of, well, if we had a bigger telescope, we could see this, or if we had a more powerful microscope, we could do that. And I'm curious what your sort of fantasy technology is. Like, what haven't we invented yet that you are dying to get your hands on to take your art to the next step?
Anyone?
My fantasy invention is to have an input device that is in your mind and to have that happen with no ethical, medical, or privacy issues.
That's interesting because I thought she was going to go where I was going to go for a minute there. Because one of the ideas I thought would just to be able to have something tied to my brain, because there can be 1,000 ideas that go through there, and to have a staff of about 1,000 people who would each take an idea and develop that idea and produce something from it.
Anyone else on the fantasy technology question? And you got to tell us when Google's going to actually do it, Michael.
Well, I was going to say, I would settle just for video conferencing that actually always works.
Good
You
luck.
actually got applause for that one. Okay, Eric, why don't you start? This is a blank check to each of you. Advice, anything that hasn't been said that will fill in a few blanks for people.
20% off on each. No, I'm kidding. No, actually, technology is going to be around for a long time. And as an artist, I was fortunate to be able to get a little bit of experience back in the 80s, working with Kaiser Permanente. And from there, I've seen what it's done, and it's gotten beyond me. I mean, it's just incredible. It's out of reach in so many ways, because every time you think you learn something, there's something new. So I think it's important to find what works for you, and be comfortable with it. I'm still using Adobe #2 when it comes to Photoshop. And I'll visit some of the other ones. And I think they're up to 9 or 10 or some other high number. But the thing about it is that I can do things with it that no one else can do, because the technology has not even been tapped into, even in #2. But things keep on changing and moving progressively forward, and I think people are getting lost. And I think that, it's time to just find what is comfortable for you, and don't worry about how fast that train is moving. Find a seat and enjoy the ride.
And Eric's very comfortable with his iPhone 4. No, I'm sorry. 5. Sorry.
I guess what really fascinates me about the use of some of these new technologies like deep learning and genetic algorithms, I guess these are not really all new, but to explore art is that they can help us explore some of the what-if questions of history. So, for example, what if we can explore questions like, what if, say, something like Impressionism, if it had not been developed in Western Europe, what if it had been developed in Central Asia? How would that art look like? And we are very close to having systems which can actually generate art like that. Or, say, look at, say, I guess in cultures where, say, things like calligraphy is supposed to be the highest form of art. Well, what if, say, let's take the Arabic language. What if instead of influence of Persian culture, what if Greek culture has been paramount and influenced the early Arabic culture? How would Arabic calligraphy look like? So I think technology can finally help us explore these vast questions of history. So I think that I'm very excited to explore that in the near future. And then I guess the other thing is that there's a lot of alarmism regarding technology. So some of that is just justified. But I would just like to remind the audience that 2,500 years ago, Socrates was complaining that literacy is becoming very common, and because of that, people are actually becoming less intelligent because they can just go and read stuff from books.
So I want to join Eric in saying that there are so many tools that have these unexplored capacities, and for me, I think starting simple is always the most important thing, and not taking anything for granted is a really important part of the work that we do in the studio. So I hear you guys talking about algorithms, and I really appreciate them, but a lot of the times we actually go for the dumb solution. The dumb meaning when you don't have the sophisticated toolkit, no coding so well, and it really allows us to rethink everything from the basics. And that I think just putting it together from tiny little blocks makes us think about the process in a whole different way and in a new way, but also question these things like apps, right? You're using all these apps and we really don't know what they do and how they do what they do, what is the kind of data that they collect. We trust that whatever we are doing, whether it's a translation between a two-dimensional thing or a three-dimensional thing or a translation of a language, that the algorithm or the machine or the technology is going to do exactly what we are asking it to do. But what if that's not the case? What if somebody made an error, or what if there was something intentional, or what if the algorithm is not functioning the way you would set it up? So I always like going back and asking these really basic questions and trying to start building everything from the ground up.
So I was thinking a little bit, just sitting here, of what you said after I left you all in this very gloomy place. That was not my intention. In a sense, I wanted you to think about it, but when I get dragged down by this, definitely. Sometimes I'm just like, wow. But then I try and go, okay, I'm just gonna put down the device and spend more time with the people that are actually in my life and not get angry at somebody who's wrong on the internet. The technology has a tendency to really suck us in like that, and it's worth reminding ourselves to maybe do something else and spend more time here and now. So that's my closing thought for you all.
One of my brothers, about a year younger than me, he passed away many years ago, and he also wrote music and was a musician. And I got many nieces and nephews now, and they never met him. But they hear his music and his art, and now they know David. And they know him really well. They know what he was like. They can tell, and that's one thing that art can do. I feel like I know you. Now.
You do.
Yeah.
2 mics. Look out.
Stereo. Ginny in stereo.
Make my own feedback. One thing that I neglected to mention about that I particularly love about using tech with my art, is the fact that there's no gravity. As a long-time maker of glass sculpture, to have no gravity is a fabulous thing. And in terms of advice, to speak to that, as you're talking about the scary aspects of tech, I would say, no matter what, remember, you're in charge. You're in charge. You can tell the tech what to do. So also just always remember what you want to say, what you want to think, what you want to communicate.
Ginny, one last word, your Smithsonian exhibit. Can you give us a minute on that, please?
I'll give you 30 seconds. Those cards in the back are from if you pay attention to that video, they had the tree stumps. The tree rings are the target that deploys the AR in the exhibit called Reforestation of the Imagination. That exhibition will open at the Smithsonian on June 28th. It will be there until January 2020, and then it will travel around the country.
And there's a book too, right?
Yeah, and maybe a movie, we're not sure yet.
Okay. I'd like to thank the MIT Enterprise Forum, Paul, and all the volunteers. I'd like to thank Town Hall. I'd like to thank all of you for coming. Lord knows, with the viaduct, we weren't sure there were going to be 5 people here tonight. So thanks for venturing out. And I'd like to close with a quote from Stuart Brand. He said, "Once a new technology rolls over you, if you're not part of the steamroller, you're part of the road." So with that thought, big round of applause for the panel, please. Thanks, everybody.